In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, salutations and greetings be upon the Messenger, his family and companions. Allahumma alimna ma yanfa'una, O Allah, teach us that which will benefit us, wanfa'na bima 'allamtana, and benefit us through what you have already taught us. وَزِدْنَا عِلْمٍ يُقَرِّبُنَا مِنْكَ بِرَحْمَتِكَ يَا أَرْحَمَ الرَّاحِمِينَ, and increase us in knowledge which will bring us closer to you, O the most merciful of those who show mercy. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين وبعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to you all, and welcome back to our sessions on the Ihya Ulum of Imam Al Ghazali, the revival of the religious sciences. It's a drop-in class, so you can come any week, anytime you want. There's different topics we do every week, as you've noticed, related to the Book of Knowledge, which is the first part of this 40 book or 40 volume work, 40 books, which we've talked about before. And last time, before the holidays, we were talking about, I think we talked about theology and philosophy, and are they praiseworthy and blameworthy, and where they come from. And I referred you to another book of Imam Al Ghazali called Deliverance from Error, how he talks about it in more detail. And then the last point which we finished on, which is where we're going to take it from today, is the sort of 5 ingredients of a true learned person that benefits from his or her knowledge. And those 5 things were: 1, worship; 2, detachment from this world; 3, to know the path to the next life; 4, jurist, to know the rules regarding what to do; and wanting, so scholars is talking about, and wanting by your learning of the Islamic rules the pleasure of Allah, to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Imam Ghazali points out that all those 5 things, if you look at them, are all to do with the akhirah, all to do with something internal. The only one which is part of this world, if you like, because worship is for the akhirah, detachment from this world, zuhud, as he says, to know the path to the akhirah, and wanting the pleasure of Allah, all things that lead us to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The one thing that doesn't in of itself is just to know the laws, just to know halal, haram, just know how to pray and fast and give zakat. These alone, those rules alone are not enough, he says. And this is the problem of his time, he's saying. Like, in our time, the scholars, he's referring to them, they learn a lot and they're masters in these subjects, but they don't have good akhlaq, they don't want Allah, they don't want the pleasure of Allah through their religious learning, and they don't purify their hearts, etc. And this is a problem of his time that he was discussing and referring to. And then he says, and he gives us a beautiful example of the great imams. So he talks now in his Ihya Ulum. So today's topic is the 4 imams: Imam Abu Hanifah, Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, and Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal. So he talks about these 4. He mentions 5 actually. He mentions Imam Sufyan al-Thawri, as we mentioned last time as well. I'm going to summarize this section. There's a lot of, it's like a bio of each one. It's not a bio, to be honest. It's talking more about their spirituality and how they would interact with the Quran, with other people, and not just their religious learning. They were imams in the sense that they were masters of Islamic law. There was no one greater than these men, and a few others as well, in understanding the Quran and Sunnah, understanding how to apply the Quran and Sunnah in our lives, rulings, legislation of Islamic law. They're the ones that really facilitated it for the whole of the Islamic empire, and whoever, even today, people don't want to respect them or follow them. They are indebted to them for what they did, and the books they wrote, and the students they produced, and the principles they came out with and established, and so forth. That early generation, these are the imams of that generation, and reflected a few others as well. Not many of these people, right? Great people. They were also great awliya, great pious men. They were also, really spiritual people that didn't just learn outwardly and give fatwa and talk and give speeches and there's nothing there. There was a lot of worship. There was a lot of what we call these things worship, zuhud, detached from this world. They wanted Allah through their actions. They didn't want to get fame and this kind of thing. And this is what we see, what Imam Ghazali mentions. One of the things he mentions about Imam Shafi, he talks about Imam Shafi first. And he says that Imam Shafi is very well known, and it's reported from him. And he mentions various reports that towards the end of the life of Imam Shafi, he has a saying which is, in many of his biographies and many books, is recorded various versions of the same kind of incident, that Imam Shafi said, I wish that my knowledge could be shared with everyone and that it has benefited everyone without it being attributed to me. I don't want any credit for this. Because he wrote books, Imam Shafi wrote books, and he was famous, and people came to him and learned from him and took his opinions, took his understanding and supported him and followed him. He said, all of this benefit, even till today, people benefit from his work. And we say, Imam Shafi said this, Imam Shafi wrote this. We mention him. He said, I wish that my name wasn't mentioned. I wish that all this benefit had gone to people without any mention of myself, showing his true sincerity. In many reports this is mentioned, it's something that's well known about him, that he wanted to be, he did what he did sincerely for the sake of Allah, not for a position, not for a payment, not for money, none of this. You don't see that in his life at all. Imam Shafi was born in Palestine and he grew up in Mecca. He was orphan, and that his father had passed away, so his mother looked after him. As a young boy, she sent him to learn. He went to Medina as a young boy in the age of 12, 11. He studied with Imam Malik, who was his teacher. Imam Ghazali mentions him first, because Imam Ghazali follows Imam Shafi in the Shafi school of thought. And obviously he's the Imam of the Shafi school, and Imam Ghazali is also of that same opinion and the school of thought of Islamic jurisprudence, of fiqh. So he used to sleep with Imam Malik, and there's many stories of him between himself and Imam Malik. Imam Malik saw his genius, saw his abilities, and picked him up, and he became a great scholar. But he lived a very, very simple life. In Makkah, he used to say we used to live off not just dates, but the date stones. We used to suck on the date stones to get a bit of nourishment when we were young. This is what we used to have to eat. We had no food basically, and just the date stones were what we would keep in our mouths. Just that little bit of distraction more than anything else to keep our mind off food. And so he lived a very poor life initially as he was a young man and growing up with tough times. But he was very, very knowledgeable. By the age of 15, he was giving fatwa. By the age of 15, his teachers had recognized his abilities, and he was now giving Islamic legal rulings. He was now somebody people would come to and learn from and ask questions. And at 15, what do 15-year-olds do today? A young man, a very mature young man, a very respectable young man at the age of 15 now, helping others. And again, he didn't do it for any other reason than the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Shafi quotes a few of the incidents and a few of the sayings of Imam Shafi. So he says that is narrated by many people, many names mentioned. I don't want to mention names because it might just distract us from the whole thing. So he says, Shafi related that a certain wise man wrote to another saying, you have been given knowledge. Defile not therefore your knowledge with the darkness of sin, showing his understanding. Lest you be caught in the darkness of your sins when the people of learning march forward by the light of their knowledge. So what is he saying? He's saying you've got knowledge and you defile this knowledge with sins. On the day of judgment, that knowledge will be light for the learned, that will guide them and they'll go far with their learning. But with the sins is darkness. You've taken away the light. So learning in of itself is not a virtue. You can learn a lot about Islam, about anything. But if you don't act upon the knowledge, if it doesn't change you as a person, that's not the knowledge that we are after. And the Prophet ﷺ said, "O Allah, I seek refuge with you from knowledge that does not benefit. Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min ilmin la yanfa." So there is a form of blameworthy knowledge, which is the next section. So Imam Ghazali talks about this, and we'll go through it. Maybe today if we reach there, but if not, definitely next week we'll talk about the idea of harmful knowledge, and when knowledge is not good. One of the times it's not good for us. It's good. Knowledge is good in of itself. It's not blameworthy or bad in of itself. But it can cause harm, or if it's neglected, can be a proof against us. And this is a big danger. The Quran, as the Prophet said, is hujjatun laka aw alayk, in the famous hadith. The Quran is either a proof for you or a proof against you. If you don't respect the Quran, if you don't read the Quran, if you neglect the guidance of the Quran, then it's going to come as a proof against you on the Day of Judgment. It's going to say, this person disrespected me, this person, didn't follow my command, this person was, had shortcomings. So it's going to be against you. Or it's a hujjatun laka, it's a hujjah, it's a proof for you. It's something that will help you in that you respected it, honored it, followed its laws and commands and so forth. So it will be something, it will be a source of blessing for you. So this is the principle that Imam Ghazali, Imam Shafi had in his, with his vast amounts of outward knowledge. He was still a man of piety, of taqwa. He would spend the night in worship. He would spend time with the pious people and take advice from them. He benefited from the people of Tasawwuf and the Sufis, and he said, I benefited from them several things, or three things in particular. One thing he mentioned was that time is like a sword. I mentioned this before, I believe. If you don't cut it, if you don't use it, it will cut you, it will use you. So if you don't use time for beneficial things, then time will use you for preoccupy you and keep you busy and away from good things, right? This is very, very important. Let's bring it to you practically, right? If you were to leave here today, yeah, let's get real, right? If you were to leave here today, and at the door somebody came and put their hand in your pocket, took out your wallet, took out your money, what would you do? Okay, took out your bank cards, took out your mobile phone. You all got a mobile phone. Took your mobile phone. What would you do? Would you say, oh, yeah, take it, it's fine, take it home, take all my details, my messages, take my life, basically. Mobile phone is everyone's life today, right? We'll stick with the wallet, money is more relevant. What would you do? You just let them take it? No, you wouldn't. I'd say, get that back. I'm on the phone, the police, you'd get angry, a serious reaction would take place, right? Well, guess what? When you walk out of this room, Shaitan's waiting at the door to steal your time. He'll put his hand in there, he'll put his ideas in your head, he'll tell you this way, he'll make you go that way. He wants to take your time. It's your capital. Our capital isn't money. Money is just a means. Our capital, real capital, is our time. And what do? We give Shaitan all that time. He's got his hands in our heart, in our mind, and we're just letting him, influence us and take us, and we're not fighting back. We wouldn't do it. We wouldn't let somebody do that with our dunya, our money and our mobile phones and things we like. But yet, for our real capital, the time we have, we seem to let it go and waste it on simple things. This is the plots of Shaitan out there. So be aware, right? This is reality. This is what Imam Ghazali, Imam Shafi, rahimahullah ta'ala, this is what he learnt and what he wanted to tell us as well. So there's many stories. I just don't know which ones to relate. So I'm going to obviously read all of them. It's just too much to read. Let's just read one from here. It says here. It's a long one. This is too long to read. It's just going to take a long time. It's basically, I'll just mention the crux of it. It says here that in a scenario, in things that happened, Imam Shafi was once listening to the Quran. So this is the point of it. And a particular ayah was recited, and when hearing the ayah, which was about Allah on the final day, Imam Shafi fell unconscious, right? So the effect of the Quran was so relevant to him that he would be affected by the recitation of the Quran, rahimahullahu ta'ala. On the particular ayah was Surah 50, it's got Roman numerals on this copy, Surah 57, Ayah 35-36, which the translation is, on that day they shall not speak, nor shall it be permitted them to put forward excuses. On that day, the day of judgment, they can't speak before Allah, they can't put their excuses before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On hearing this, Imam Shafi, he said, I saw Imam Shafi's color change, and his whole body tremble. And yet, in fact, he was so intensely agitated that he fell in a swoon, so he fell unconscious. On coming to consciousness, he started to repeat, I seek refuge in Allah against the den of the liars and the scoffing of the thoughtless. O Allah, to you the hearts of the Arifin, the Gnostics, those who know you, have submitted themselves. And before your throne, the heads of those who yearn for you are bowed low. O Allah, bestow your bounty upon me and crown me with intelligence. Through the grace of through your grace, forgive my shortcomings. Thereupon he walked away and we departed. Right. So this was an incident showing the immense impact of the Quran, the recitation and the meanings of the Quran on Imam Shafi, rahimahullah ta'ala. He also said, may Allah have mercy upon him, Whoever does not keep himself free of blemishes of this world, I gets involved with this world. Unless you do that, so whoever does not keep himself free of the blemishes of this world, his knowledge will not benefit him anything. Right? So he's telling you the dunya and knowledge don't go together. Whoever through his knowledge obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his heart becomes illuminated. And he said this is a very important one. He said everyone has someone whom they love and someone who they hate. If make the object of your love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and object of your hate this world. Right? So this shows us that he wasn't after the world through his knowledge, through his immense learning. He wanted to benefit the Muslims. He wanted to improve his relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his worship, his own heart. The 5 things Imam Ghazali mentioned, he was a master of all 5, as can be seen from these reports regarding him. And the beautiful saying of Imam Ahmed about Imam Ahmed is another one of the 4 great Imams. He said to his son asked him, what sort of man, what was Imam Shafi? Because his son reports that I had never heard my father, Imam Ahmed, make a dua except he mentioned Imam Shafi in the dua. So every single dua Imam Ahmed made since he knew Imam Shafi, his teacher, he never made a dua except he mentioned his teacher. This is how much he loved him and respected him. So he asked him, he says, "Oh father, you pray so much for Imam Shafi, this man. What's so special about him?" Because he's a young man, he's growing up, might not have met him. So he said, Imam Ahmed, oh my son, Shafi was like the sun to the world. He was like the sun to the world and like afiyah to people. Afiyah means well-being. You want good in your life, you want ease in your life and well-being. We all seek that, right? We don't want problems. Well-being, physically, spiritually, every form, right? He was like this to people. When he was around, there was just pure beauty and goodness and well-being. Then is there anything that could replace either of these 2 things? The sun that gives light to everything and the well-being that we all seek. This was who Imam Shafi was. He says here, there is not a single man who has touched a pen with his hand, i.e. written a book or authored or studied, that is not indebted to Imam Shafi rahimahullah ta'ala. So this is the testimony of another great Imam of Islam, right? Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal is a very, very big scholar of Islam, very well known. He's telling you this man was one of the greatest men to have ever lived in terms of knowledge, but also somebody who benefited the community and so forth. As for Imam Malik, so I'm missing a lot of narrations. You can read the Book of Knowledge. It's not arrived. The order we made from America for the books hasn't arrived yet, but once it does, we'll let you know. But you can read these reports. The beautiful stories of Imam Shafi, Imam Malik, Imam Abu Hanifah. As for Imam Malik, Imam says he too was adorned with those 5 characteristics we mentioned: worship, detachment from this world, knowing, wanting the path of the akhirah in his, what he's doing, wanting Allah's pleasure. And the 4th one was being learned and knowing the rulings, and then obviously through that wanting the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he was asked once, he goes, "Oh Malik," his name is Imam Malik, so his name is Malik. So he goes, what do you say knowledge is? You were asked, what is knowledge? So he replied, it is, knowledge is fair and beautiful, but find what you need from the time you open your eyes in the morning to the time you close them in the evening, and confine yourself to it. What does that mean? It means basically knowledge for you is what you got to practice. When you open your eyes in the morning till you go to sleep at night, what do you need to do? For you, that is knowledge. Imam Malik is saying practical. He's not saying to you Quran, narrations, memorization, hadith on hadith, fatwa after fatwa. Knowledge is what? When you wake up, what you need to practice, etiquettes of waking up, wudu, purification, hygiene, the way du'as you need to make, family, there's so many things if you think about from your time you wake up to the time you go to sleep. Do we as Muslims know all the things that we need to do? The etiquettes, the manners, the obligations of course come first. Then there's recommendations, there's sunan, there's highly emphasized actions, but everything is a part of our deen that we need to do. Imam Malik is giving beautiful advice. He's defined knowledge for us. Knowledge for every single person is what you need to do from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep every single day. So there's new things happening a particular day. You're going on Hajj, you need to practice Hajj. Learn about Hajj, that's knowledge for you. Zakat's coming up, learn about Zakat. Ramadan comes, learn about fasting. You got to pray 5 daily prayers. Know the obligatory actions of prayer, know the sunnah of prayer, learn about all these. This is what knowledge is. This is what he defined. So he shows us that he's defining for us what reality of knowledge is, and not just telling us, it's amassing massive amounts of, issues in, masail in one's head, and memorizing poetry, or memorizing the Quran and the Hadith, as many people think it is. It's actually what benefits a person and helps him or her to act upon his religion. Imam Malik was so not just about the learning, he was more about the sort of the etiquettes of learning. He was one of the great imams who actually showed us this. Whenever he would want to, whenever somebody would come and ask him about hadith, he was a great hadith scholar, a great fiqh scholar as well. Whenever he was asked to teach, he wouldn't just teach. He'd go home, he'd put on he'd shower, he'd do ghusl, he'd put on his best clothes, he'd put on perfume. He'd ask for a raised platform. There was a raised platform made for him, he didn't ask for it, but he would take it. He asked for a raised platform to sit on, and then he would narrate the hadith of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He would sit with a lot of awe and respect. And he was asked, why do you go to all this measure to teach people? He goes, I want to honor the words of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We can't belittle that. That comes first. When we honor those words, we'll benefit from them. Right? When in one occasion, somebody in the masjid, this is often quoted now even, but it happened at this time, in the masjid or during the class, one of the students was speaking up a little bit. So he heard some sound, somebody speaking or something. So he told them off. And he said, have you not heard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala say, do not raise your voices above the voice of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. At the beginning of Surah 49, Surah Hujurat, لا ترفعوا أصواتكم فوق صوت النبي. Right? And the ayah continues, lest your deeds be annulled, lest your deeds be taken out, finished. And it's raising your voice above the voice of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It talks about people that came and shouted or called out to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a whole context to it. The Sahaba generally didn't do that. There was this one incident. But he said, and the hadith are the words of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So anybody who raises their voices whilst we're reciting the hadith will also fall into this category. And this is what you're exposing yourself to. So he would revere the sayings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam immensely. He also said, knowledge is a light which God places where He wishes. It's a light. It does not depend on prolific relation of hadith. It does not depend on narrating mass amounts of hadith. This is also a narration from Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, I believe, who said, I don't think I'll find it now, I didn't mark the page. Who said knowledge is not light. I'm just going to try and figure it out by saying it. To find the actual line, I'll tell you. Knowledge is a light which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places in the heart. And then he didn't say it's not something. He said, and by which something happens. I can't remember what he said. Imam said Abdullah ibn Mas'ud is a companion. So there's a famous saying about knowledge as well. Knowledge is a light which Allah places in the heart, by which He discerns the truth, or something like this. But that's real knowledge. Knowledge is not and he said, and I think he said the same thing at the beginning as well. It's not prolific narration of kathratul riwayat. It's not just lots and lots of narrating of hadith. That's not what knowledge is. Wallahu alam. Right? But that's a saying of Imam Malik as well, which we need to understand. Imam Shafi talks about Imam Malik because he was his student. He said, I was once with Imam Malik and he was given 48 questions. 48 situations, scenarios were posed to him and he was asked to answer them. To 32 of which he replied, La adri, I don't know. So 32 out of 48, he said, no, I don't know. He answered the remaining 16. And now today somebody would come to him with the question, I don't know the answer. Oh, he doesn't know nothing, this guy, right? Jahil, ignorant. Second question, he doesn't know anything. Third question, don't know. Fourth question. He said that La adri is half of knowledge, right? And saying I don't know is half of knowledge. There's no humiliation in saying you don't know, especially if you don't know, right? It's actually a beautiful thing to not answer the question if you don't know the answer or you're not sure about the answer. Imam Malik, one of the greatest imams, didn't answer 32 questions out of 48. You would think, oh, that's a blemish on him. No, this is a praiseworthy act that Imam Shafi is telling you about. Look, we were amazed at him, and how he was humble enough to pass on the question, not answer the question. It says here, for this reason, Shafi said that when the learned men are enumerated, Malik would be the most outstanding, and that he was indebted to no one more than he was indebted to Imam Malik, rahimahullah ta'ala. One of the titles of Imam Malik was An-Najm, the star. He was considered the star of his time, rahimahullah ta'ala. In other reports, Imam Shafi does praise other scholars. Later on, he praises other scholars as well. He praises, I think the Imam Abu Thawr or Imam Al Ghazali, and he says he was just as good as Imam Malik, if not better, but his students weren't as good as Imam Malik's students. I think it was Imam Al Ghazali. He said, I found him to be a great Imam, Imam Abdurrahman Al Ghazali, who's buried in Lebanon today. One of the great Imams, like Imam Abu Hanifah, like Imam Ahmed, one of the great Mujtahid Imams. But his school of thought never survived. Why? Imam Shafi explains to us, he didn't have students like the students of Imam Malik and Imam Abu Hanifa and others, right? His students didn't carry on his tradition and serve him. They obviously went and had other opinions or had their own independent way. And this is actually why the Hanafi madhab survived, because Imam Abu Yusuf in particular and Imam Muhammad, these two great Imams, although they were in of themselves independent, they were students, but they weren't in need of Imam Abu Hanifa for their understanding. They'd learned enough themselves. Obviously, their teacher's always a teacher, you respect that. But you get to a level where you can understand for yourself. That's what Imam Muhammad and Imam Abu Yusuf were at. They were at the same level of Imam Shafi. Imam Muhammad was the teacher of Imam Shafi. Imam Muhammad, one of the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, was the teacher of Imam Shafi, right? Imam Shafi came to him to learn and so forth. And they were the teachers of Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal and so forth. So they were great Imams in themselves, just as qualified as the ones we're mentioning now. But what they decided to do was not to become independent. And they decided to serve their teacher and record the details of what their teacher said. So Imam Muhammad was constantly writing down what Imam Abu Hanifa said, what Imam Abu Yusuf said, his own opinions he'd put in there, what Imam Zufar was another great Imam in the gathering, what he said, Imam Al-Lu'lu'i, Ziyad Al-Lu'lu'i, I forget his full name, Abdurrahman ibn Ziyad Al-Lu'lu'i, I believe, Imam Dawud Al-Ta'i. There was a whole gathering, a whole group of scholars that would sit and discuss, and he would record everything. And because he did that and he dedicated himself to his teacher, that survived. And that was passed on and taught, and many teachers and many scholars, and it spread. So the whole tradition of Imam Abu Hanifa, his colleagues, and the whole school of thought, it's not one person, it's the whole school of thought, were then taken and spread and understood and followed now by over half of the ummah today, right? So it was all the sincerity of the student, the teacher, that really produced what we have today in this great tradition of the four schools of Sunni Islamic law, right? Schools of jurisprudence, as they call, right? And that most of the Muslims follow today. And we need to adhere to them and stick to them, because this has been the way of the Muslims from the beginning, from time of the Sahaba, right? Not later on. They all followed the scholars of their time. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ. When the Prophet left them, who did they follow? The scholars of the Sahaba. It wasn't, I've got an opinion. It wasn't 10,000, 20,000 opinions. It was 4, 5, 6, 7, because the Sahaba were the ones, 10, 12, 15, 20 maybe, scholars, fatwa givers, muftis amongst the Sahaba. That's it. In the next generation, we can go to a few hundred, and then, maybe a bit more, and then that's it. It stuck with them. They were the ones that were the early generations that did all the hard work for us, and we're living off their fruits. And this is the problem today. We've got that fruit, right? We don't even bother recognizing the tree. But even if you recognize the tree, that's got roots, and it's got a trunk, it's got a lot of other components, it's been watered, it's been looked after. It's a whole tradition of 1400 years from the time of the Prophet ﷺ till today, and we're just living off the fruit. We're not being appreciative of the whole thing. And when you see the fruit, it's nice and it's tasty and you take it, but you don't understand the process, and we kind of not just don't understand it, we kind of misunderstand it. We think, why should we take the fruit for? Let's go to the roots, right? But you forget the whole process that came in this process to us. You should go back in the same process. This is what you do in Islamic sciences. You learn, you need the fruits, because the fruits are our acts of worship, right? What we need to do every day, aspects what we talked about earlier, what we need to know from our waking up to going to sleep. But they're based on the Quran, they're based on the Sunnah, which are the roots. But the process of getting to them was the process of the Imams and their understanding and their presenting of why this is haram, why this is halal, why this is disliked, why the ruling is as such, why you have to pray like this, why you have to do Hajj like this rite of Hajj, this zakat, etc. The processes they defined, they understood, they interacted with the Quran and Sunnah, And then scholars came after them to, branch out further, to break it down for us, to make it easier for us so we could get the ruling, basically, right? I'm pretty sure had we been speaking to these great imams, you would never understood them. Because they're so far in the roots, and we were so far here, we needed this transitional period to get to us, to understand what's going on in terms of the rulings, right? And we got them. Right? The Muslims at the early time were much more, so in general, knowledge was a bit more, was generally more widespread, and ignorance was less. And now ignorance is spreading, and real knowledge, right, which is acting upon it, benefiting us, is dying out. And there's something which we should be worried about, because the Prophet ﷺ said, Dajjal will not come. Dajjal, the impostor, the Antichrist, as this translated sometimes, Al-Masih ad-Dajjal, the Antichrist, the impostor Christ, Christ meaning Savior, right? The pretender the one who pretends to save everyone. He won't come until, in one hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, until, in Imam Ahmed's Musnad, the sound hadith, or Hassan hadith, I believe, that until he's not mentioned on the mimbar. So he's not going to mention on speeches, right, on Friday and so forth, on the mimbar. And people move away from knowledge. So as long as there's knowledge amongst us and he's mentioned, we're okay, it's probably saying. When people don't mention Dajjal, and when people go away from knowledge, what does it mean by knowledge here? Same thing, we talked about knowledge. It's a term that we're going to talk about again, by the way. Imam Al Ghazali goes through certain terms which have been distorted over time. Knowledge here doesn't mean necessarily rulings, right? Fiqh, halal, haram. What Imam Al Ghazali explains to us in a moment, after the biographies of these great scholars, are words that have been changed. Knowledge is, he talks about harm of knowledge first, and then he talks about the names. So he talks about ilm, fiqh, tadhkir. These certain words that were used for great things. Now it's a case of, it just defines this now. It's been misinterpreted and misunderstood now. And similarly, when we hear the word knowledge now, what do we think? When the Prophet said here, ilm in this hadith, idbarum min al-ilm, there'll be a going away from, it's not just, the hadith doesn't just say people go, there'll be a movement away from knowledge. People move, like it's a whole trend in a sense, the wording gives that kind of meaning. There'll be a movement away from knowledge, right? What knowledge are we talking about? Somebody will tell you, it refers to fiqh and Quran and, like rulings, and people won't learn their fiqh. Imam Ghazali probably wouldn't agree with you on that, right? If you look at the interpretations of the hadith and the books of hadith, more likely people will not want to learn about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to purify their hearts and to improve themselves, because that is just a portion of it. Really, the fiqh side is a portion of it. So yes, that's included, but one of the forms of distortion is restriction. One of the forms of distortion is restriction. How? When you restrict the meaning of knowledge to one thing, you've distorted it. Because knowledge is so many aspects and branches, right? And you've said it's this. Now, people think, that's knowledge, so they'll put all the effort in that. But there's so many other things they're missing out on, it's not going to produce the results. So yes, we've got plenty of people learning fiqh, but what's their akhlaq like? And I've spent my time learning in Syria, and it's a reality I've got to share with you. Most of the people out there were not morally good. Students of knowledge weren't upright, praying 5 times a day even. This is how shocking it is, right? I won't tell you what they did, but they spent a lot of their time in internet cafes, right? They spent a lot of their time, joking around, doing silly things, right? And they didn't pray. And funny thing happened, and this is the culture that was out there, but it's a culture. So just restricting knowledge to that, studying the deen is very dangerous, right? Or studying fiqh and so forth. One of our teachers, he was upset when he was saying it as well. He goes, I went into the Masjid Bilal, he was talking about where the Ma'ad al-Fatah, he's a teacher from Ma'ad al-Fatah. We were not there when he told us the story though. He goes, I went to the Masjid and I asked the Imam or the caretaker, more than someone, what time is it? I need to pray Zuhr, etc., this, that, the other. I need to pray my sunnah, pray. So he goes, it's this time. He goes, alhamdulillah, I'll have time to pray my fard and sunnahs and everything. So he goes and the caretaker of the masjid, he comes and turns to me and he says, since when do you guys pray sunnahs? Since when do you, the scholars, the students, I just see you pray fard and disappear all the time, which we see now as well, right? Because the caretaker prays sunnah, he's like, I pray sunnah, it's part of the, we should do, simple people. But you guys don't pray. I see all of you students, you just go off and you just talk and chat and this, you see, it's not like you go and I don't know what you do. I know what you do, you don't pray sunnahs. So he goes, why you were concerned about praying your sunnahs here for? And because as a teacher, he was really upset. He's like, these are our students. This is the image they're giving to people around them, right? So this is unfortunately what's going on. And so we need to understand knowledge is much greater than just learning masail, just studying fiqh books. That doesn't produce piety and taqwa and change of heart, improvement of character. What does is reciting the Quran, is remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is attending gatherings where we are guided to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a sense, right? There was gatherings where the Prophet would talk about the relationship between yourself and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reminders more than just knowledge, right? There's various forms of teaching or instruction, and it's not limited to this one thing, right? Zuhud, practicing what we learn basically, and detaching from this world. Those 5 things what Imam Ghazali said. The first two were worship and detachment from this world. Where's our worship? Right? Students of sacred knowledge are getting accused of no sunnah prayers. Right? The lay folk, they will never miss their nafil prayers, let alone the sunnah prayers. They're like so engrossed, like, I've got my sunnah, I've got my nafil, I'm going to do it. They even think it's, you have to do sunnah, nafil, otherwise you're sinful, which is not the case. Hence the students of knowledge think, oh, I'm not sinful, I might as well just miss it, it's not a problem. When you learn, you can use the knowledge and it can work against you. Right? I've learned that it's not sinful. Oh, it's not sinful, I don't have to pray. I thought you have to pray all the prayer, so many fard, so many sunnah, so many nafil. Oh, the fard is obligatory, then the sunnah are recommended and good and highly recommended, and then the nafil are good and extra. I'll just stick to the fard then. Right? This is the attitude that somehow has come from that learning, right? Which is totally wrong. That's not the purpose of learning whatsoever. So this is something that Imam Ghazali is trying to explain to us. Like, this knowledge that we need to learn is a big aspect. It's not just limited to fiqh masail and sitting in scholarly lectures and stuff like that. It's a lot more practical. That we need to work on ourselves, like Imam Shafi did, like Imam Malik did, like Imam Abu Hanifah did. We need to practice what we preach. If you look at the life of the Prophet ﷺ, how often he instructed the Muslims to read the Quran, to do so much dhikr, so much la ilaha illallah, so much subhanallah. This is practical. This has an effect on us. This changes our character. He told people to send salutations upon him, and they obviously wanted to. Allah commanded it as well. But he emphasized the importance, the virtue of all these actions for them to be practiced, for them to be means of our spiritual progress, right? And he didn't just say, sit and learn, sit and learn, sit and learn. Yes, there's a time for learning. There's the importance of learning. Imam Ghazali does not criticize learning. He criticizes learning alone for the wrong reasons, isolating it and restricting it to one thing and then not practicing. That is a blameworthy thing. And everybody agrees to that as well. And unfortunately, we see that to some extent today, which is not a good thing, right? Imam Abu Hanifah is also mentioned here in this section, and he was a great man of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One famous report about him to show you, how he was. It's a famous report. Allah knows best about the soundness of it. I think it was included here. I did read it somewhere. It says, according to another report, it was his custom to spend half the night in prayer until one day he was walking through a street and there were some people talking, and one of them said to the other, this is the man, this is Abu Hanifa, this is the man that spends all night in prayer. And he's spending half the night in prayer. So he said to himself, I can't make somebody sinful. They're saying wrong things about me. I need to pray the whole night. In one report he said, I feel ashamed before Allah that people are saying this about me and I'm not doing it. So he started praying the whole night in prayer for the sake of Allah, that if people are saying this about him, then he should be doing it for the sake of Allah. Obviously his intention was, and to protect somebody from making lies against him, right? So this is the kind of person he was, rahimahullahu ta'ala. One of the things about Abu Hanifa, and to show you exactly what Imam Ghazali is talking about, in his time people were after jobs. Imam Hanifa was offered the highest position in the whole Islamic empire, even above the Khalifa, because, and you should know this, the highest position in the Islamic empire is not the Caliph, okay? Politically it's the Caliph, okay? Politically making decisions and, the whole society is the Caliph. But he's regulated by another person. Because remember, the Caliph doesn't have to be Islamic scholar. It's a political position, leadership position. He has to have certain qualities, and knowledge, of course, of the deen is an essential part of that, but he doesn't have to be a mufti and that level of scholarship. So he has to be regulated by somebody who is. The only person that regulates him is the qadi. Not the qadi means judge, okay, like a judge of court of law. So he has to appoint the qadi himself. Okay, so he gets to appoint the Qadi, but the Qadi has to, a proper Qadi would be above and on top of and controlling. So if he said to the leader, that's wrong, give that back to him, or that's wrong, you owe him money, the leader has to obey. Because the Qadi regulates everything. Ramadan is on this day, because this is the sighting of the moon. He regulates the Islamic things. The leaders don't decide. The Qadi, Islamic, they call him, later on in today's day and age, they still have the concept, but they call him Al-Qadi Al-Shar'i. Right? So in the past it was just the Qadi, the judge. Now it's the Islamic judge or the Sharia judge, because they have other judges and everything, right, that deal with divorce and commerce laws and whatever. And then they have one that deals with, in Islamic countries, deals with the Islamic rulings. He's still given the role of, when does Ramadan start? The certain rulings that are to do with Islam, he'll be the one that decides them. In the past, he would decide everything, because everything was Islamic law, whether it was commerce, whether it was marital law, whether it was anything to do with acts of worship, Ramadan, Hajj. He was the one that helped with Hajj and decided when Hajj starts. The Caliph can, which is obviously his control, can relieve the Qadi of his duties. So if he thought the Qadi is being too harsh on me, or the way he's going is being too sincere, too good, because the Qadi has got to be good and true, right? Then he's not working in the favor of the leaders, because the leaders weren't always, like we said, pious and and neither were the Qadis, by the way. Some of the Qadis were worldly and used their positions like that as well. It differs from person to person. You get many great leaders like Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, like the first four caliphs. Then you get certain leaders that were just after wealth. If you look at Andalus especially, and some of the Abbasid leaders, they were just about luxury and that literally kingship and kingdoms rather than palaces and that kind of thing, rather than actually helping people. If the leader appoints a judge and dismisses him instantly, there might be an uproar as well. There might be like, oh, what's going on here, kind of thing. And obviously, if it's a famous judge, so Imam Abu Hanifah, which is where we got off this, this kind of angle, was offered the leadership. Why? Because the Abbasids had just come into power and ousted the Umayyads. Imam Abu Hanifah lived between both empires, 80 AH to 150 AH. The Umayyads finished I think in 131 AH, I think it was something like that, 132 AH. We're going to do history in the course, I'll look at the dates. It was around that time. So he was literally in his prime when, the Abbasids came into power. The Abbasids did like they took over, defeated them, uprising kind of thing, right? Hidden uprising. They built it up over many years, underground uprising, which was actually in support of the family of the Prophet ﷺ, like the descendants of Sayyidina Hassan and Sayyidina Hussein. But the people that took control his history were the descendants of Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ. So they became the Abbasid Empire because they were working together first. It later transpired they got the support for the family of the Prophet ﷺ, the descendants of the Prophet ﷺ. But in reality, the people that had control of this whole underground, it was really hidden, by the way, right? There was like a leader who had 12 helpers, who had 70 people that he had got in support, who had got groups but they didn't know the name of the leader. Like, it was so hidden that it's an underground thing. So it's interesting if you read into it how they got the Umayyads out of power, kind of thing. So at the time when they came into power, they needed to legitimize their power, like we're in charge, we've taken over. So one of the main ways you get that is by getting the pious people. The pious people are in charge. As much as the leaders are in charge, Ali, who are the real people in charge? The great scholars, the great pious people. The people look towards these people and respect them, honor them, have a lot of trust in them. So they wanted people like Imam Shafi, Imam Sufyan al-Thawri was one of them we mentioned, to become judges, to take the leadership positions, Islamic ones, so that they could say to the masses, look, the scholars are supporting us, your pious people are supporting us, so follow us. So Imam Hanifa did not agree with the Abbasid Empire coming into power. He said they did it in the wrong way. He didn't agree with the whole system. He was in support of the family of the Prophet ﷺ. And so was Imam Malik. He lived around that time as well. So was Imam Sufyan al-Thawri. So they all fled from Qada being a judge, the act of judging. They all didn't want to take the position. And the famous incident Imam Hanifa is that he was brought to the court. You've got to be a judge, right? So he said to the leader of the time, he goes, I'm not qualified to be a judge. So what did he say? I'm not qualified to be a judge. So the leader said, you've lied. You're qualified. He goes, you've proven I'm not qualified to be a judge. Because if I'm lying, how can you make a liar a judge? If I'm telling the truth, I've told you that I'm not qualified to be a judge. So whichever way now, you can't make me a judge. So they did these clever tricks. So he was imprisoned, by the way. So he was imprisoned and punished, and he died in prison, Imam Abu Hanifa rahimahullah ta'ala. For what? For not wanting to legitimize the Abbasids basically and take a leadership role. So that is exactly what Imam Ghazali is talking about. These were the great Imams. They did what they did. They learned what they learned for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today, in my age, Imam Ghazali, you see you learning, they want to be qadi, they want to be this, they want to be that, they want the money, they want the post, they want the prestige. What's happened to the taqwa? What's happened to the akhirah? This is just worldly stuff, right? So this is the problem we have. This is what Imam Ghazali is highlighting in this section. He talks about these great Imams. May Allah have mercy upon them all. This is but a small part of the lives of these three Imams, so only three are mentioned. As for Imam Ahmed bin Hanbal and Sufyan al-Thawri, their followers are not as many as those of the other Imams. The three major scholars were Imam Abu Hanifah, Imam Malik and Imam Shafi, not only because of the number of followers, but because of the fact that when there were Islamic empires, they were under one of these three madhabs. So the Ottomans were under the Hanafi school. Islamic Spain was under the Maliki school. Egypt was in the Shafi school, right? They followed that particular way of governance of applying the Islamic law, whereas the Hanbali school was less in number. Not as there were people that followed it, and it was practiced by some leaders, etc., but not much. If you look at every leadership, and why was that? Because you had to appoint a judge, and a judge is going to rule in accordance with his way of judging, and that's going to be one of the four schools in the Sunni Islamic empire. There was times where there was Shia states, and there were Shia rules, and they have their own schools of thought as well. The most famous being the Ja'fari school of thought. There's also the Zaydis as well, and they had their time and place as well in certain areas of the Islamic world. But the main one was the Hanafi one. Ottomans, you all know about that now. It's on the Ertugrul and everything, right? But they were not only in the Mughal Empire, right, where most of us are from, even in Egypt, even in North Africa. When the Ottomans came in charge, they made the Hanafi madhab spread to that part of the world. So there's people in Tunisia and that actually are Hanafis, whereas the majority of people, they're all Malikis, because North Africa, the leaders, the states that were formed were all on the Maliki madhab. Islamic Spain was Maliki basically. And Shafis are less so, but they had places. Iran was Shafi in the olden days. Imam Ghazali is from Iran. All of Iran was Shafi madhab, but then the Shias came in and changed all that. But Central Asia was mostly, Iraq was Shafi and places like that. And Hanafi. There's a big competition in Iraq, to be honest. Imam Hanifah, Imam Ahmed, in Kufa, Baghdad, they were centers of learning. There was big debates between the great scholars. And these scholars debated, by the way, as well. But Imam Shafi, one of the things I should have mentioned, Imam Shafi said, I never went into a debate except that I wished that Allah put the truth on the tongue of my opponent. He didn't want to debate, he wanted the truth, right? So he didn't do this for that reason. And they debated things like on fiqh levels, not like, Aqidah levels. Imam Hanifah did actually. He debated with atheists and others and groups, and he has books in Aqidah, therefore. The other Imams don't. Imam Hanifah has a couple of books in Aqidah attributed to him. But that's, therefore, not mentioned, these two Imams in detail. Nevertheless, of the five, Ahmed and Sufyan were the best known for piety and asceticism. In terms of the actual narrations about them, they were the better known. Since this book, however, is full of the account of their works and words, there is no take up the lives of these in this moment. They're going to be mentioned throughout, their sayings and so forth. For the present, examine the lives of these three Imams that we just talked about, and ask yourself whether these states, words and works through which they forsook the world and devoted themselves to God were merely the result of the knowledge of the several branches of jurisprudence, such as contracts of buying, selling, divorce, marriage, things are mentioned, or the result of a higher and nobler knowledge. Is that where they got this from? Did they learn about fiqh and these rulings? Restriction is a form of distortion, right? You get the wrong idea what knowledge is. Did they do that, or did they learn the whole branches of knowledge that go beyond these simple things that people think knowledge is? Scrutinize too those who claim to be following the example of these Imams. People claim to follow them now, and find out for yourself whether their claim is true or false. Do they follow them in all of this, or they just say, you follow Imam Hanifah, this is the fatwa, this is the fatwa, this is the fatwa, this is the fatwa. That's what they do. That's not what Imam Hanifah was only about, and to limit him to that is not justice to Imam Hanifah, Imam Shafi, and so forth. We will stop. We won't get to this next section, which we will talk about next week. It's important, very important. We're going to be talking about black magic next week, right? Astronomy, astrology, right? The beneficial or what is blameworthy knowledge, what is harmful knowledge, and Imam Ghazali defines that. So amongst it is black magic and talismans and what does it say here? Stuff like that, right? Incantations. And amongst it is astrology and other things. And after that, I believe it talks about those things I mentioned. The names have been changed. So we hear a name now, we hear a word. What do we think? Imam Ghazali talks. That's not just important in terms of knowledge. It's everything today. There's this concept of the war of terminologies. If I said to you right now, jihad, what comes into your mind? Exactly. This terminology, this word is a terminology. It's a term. It's been put into we've been programmed to think, not just us, the whole world, to think a certain thing when we hear Sharia law, right? For me personally, it's normal. I know what it means. I've studied several years. Some of you will be comfortable with this term, but you say outside in the street, and it's a whole different story, right? So this is the same thing happened in the time of Imam Ghazali. These words were distorted. When they were heard, people thought the wrong things, right? That's what we're going to talk about next week as well. So the blameworthy knowledge, what is it? The categories, there's 3 categories Imam Ghazali mentions, and also the terminologies and how they've been distorted in a sense. That'll probably cover next week's lesson. So you know what we're going to do next week, inshallah ta'ala. Any questions for today? So like I said, it's new topics every week. They're related, they're all about knowledge, but they're all really important to understand and inshallah apply. It's all the build up to the real stuff, which is, so the next book is Book of Aqidah, which is interesting. And this could be finished in 5 lessons, could be finished in 50 lessons. It just depends how much I want to talk, really, and I don't want to do injustice to Imam Ghazali and his message. I have been asked to summarize and go, but I just don't feel that's right. I think we're here for the long run. We're not here to rush into things. And the more we actually follow Imam Ghazali's method, I think the greater impact it will have on us, and the deeper it will get into our hearts, rather than, because today's day and age is all about this fast food, fast culture, and we just read through things, skim, you can get books these, and I've got a few of them. It says, save time and money and read the summary. Right? Save time and money, read the summary. So it's everything's like that today, right? Get the abridged version, get the shortened version, and there are abridgments of Ihya Ulum, right? So I've been thinking about it, and I just can't bring myself to do that. So I'm going to stick to the original plan and go through this book as long as it takes, right? And if there are sections which we can abridge for good reasons, we'll do that as well. I'm not going to be rigid as well. But so the 5 things, just to repeat them, are. So the 5 characteristics of a real scholar, that's what Imam Ghazali mentions. They need to have these things. Number 1 also is abid, a worshipper. Worship. So knowledge has to produce worship. Otherwise it's purposeless, right? It's just having a status or a name, right? It's like a doctor of medicine and not actually helping people. I'm a doctor. All your life you can say you're a doctor, but how many patients have you treated, right? It's got to be applied. Knowledge is applied in worship. It's also applied in what Imam thought. The second one is zuhd, zahid. Zahid is a name, maybe somebody's called Zahid here, but Zahid means somebody who's detached. Zuhd in Arabic means something that you stay away from. The Prophet said, Izhad fi dunya yuhibbak Allah. Get away from this world, don't have it in your heart, don't detach literally yourself from this world, do without. Abstinence is one translation. Allah will love you. Izhad fima inda nas yuhibbak an-nas. Leave what the people have, don't go for that, and the people will love you. Right? So getting away from this world is loving Allah. Like that question, like that scenario Imam Shafi gave us. Either the world or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You love the world, you got to hate Allah. You love Allah, you got to hate the world. It doesn't come together. You can't have both. But like Imam Ghazali teaches us, the dunya is a means. So we love of the world that which brings us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As for the rest, it's just idle stuff. We don't need it, right? So that's how we should treat the world. Number 3, that he's a knower of the path to the akhirah. So this knowledge has to include the knowledge of the akhirah, the path, tariq ilm al-akhirah. This is a term used often in this book by Imam Ghazali. The knowledge of the path to the akhirah is something that's a part of his learning and understanding, and obviously he's then on that path and applying that. He's a jurist in the sense that he knows what the people need, what the people need to practice, and he can give answers to people to be a true scholar. And by his jurisprudence, by answering the questions of people, he doesn't want to be known as knowledgeable, or his mufti is really good at answering. He wants the pleasure of Allah and to do service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Those are the 5 key components mentioned by Imam Al Ghazali for a true scholar. And he mentions all of them apart from the jurisprudence is from the dunya. But with the right intention, even that is for the akhirah. So, worship, being zuhd, even the other ones can be turned around as well. With the wrong intention, they can become for the dunya, right? With the right intention, jurisprudence can become for the akhirah. Right? And this applies to any job or knowledge, basically. Even if you are a doctor, even if you are an accountant, if you, through your knowledge, you just want status, just want dunya, then that's what you'll get. But if you actually want to serve Allah and the community and benefit people, that's part of the akhirah. So intention is important in this fourth category of knowledge. This whole concept of knowledge is not intention becomes a big component. So yeah, I hope that answers the question. Yeah. Any yeah. It's going to come next week, I think, to be honest. This whole what you're saying right now, but I'll give you an example of it from what I've read for next week. Well, I can't recall where it is now, but it's an example of the physician itself. In that, Imam Ghazali mentions an example here, roughly, from what I remember, that if you go to a physician and you've got an illness, and you say, look, my hand's hurting, this, that, the other, and I've applied this cream here, right, in this palm. He says you should have applied it in the other palm. Your instant reaction is, what? The problem's here, what have I got to apply it here for? Right? But if you trust the doctor and the physician, you're going to apply it there, aren't you? And if you want to get better, listen to the doctor, right? So you might not understand what he's saying to you. You might not understand the principle behind it or what's going on. But for your betterment, you understand that the doctor knows better, right? And we tend to say that. It's changing these days. So many incompetent doctors about. Right? So many people think they know better than doctors, to be honest, right? No, we shouldn't belittle the doctors at all. So similarly, in scholarship, in fatwa, in these kind of things, in spiritual guidance, you're told to do something, you may not understand the purpose of it. You may not understand the goal behind it, but it's for your spiritual development. So because it's a thing that people don't understand, you know, the human soul, human intellect is more prone to not accept it. I don't want to say reject it, but not accept it easily, right? So when you're told do this act, do that act, what are the proofs behind it? That's when the questions come out. What's going on here? Trust in the people that are experts in the field, and you'll benefit, right? Like you do for your car, as I mentioned before, you go to the mechanic, like you go to the doctor for that, like, you know, your accountant advises you something, you don't follow the accountant's advice and you've got to pay double the tax bill. Who's to blame? You, because the accountant was advising you how to avoid tax, not evade tax, right? Tax avoidance is fine, tax evasion is crime, right? So no, don't listen to your accountant if he tells you to do that, otherwise he can get you in trouble. But yeah, you know, disclaimer there, tax avoidance, you know, you might disagree with it morally, etc. That's up to you. But in terms of legally, it's not a problem, right? But tax evasion is a problem. But that's the thing. The experts know how to the loopholes and everything, and you trust them in their field. That's the point here. So when it comes to this, there is a you know, it's a bit of a jump people need to make, and it's hard for some people. But all the good is in following the good, right? If you see good in someone, whether you understand the finer details or not, follow the good that people have to offer, right? And of course, all of it's based on the Sharia, right? Imam Ghazali is a man of the Sharia first, before he became a man of the spiritual side. And that's his journey. He saw the spiritual side needs more attention, so he pushed it. And that's something we're benefiting from today. Imam Malik, Imam Shafi, they had their spiritual side, which is based on sound Islamic rulings. So as long as that's in place, you know, we should trust in our ulama and our teachers and follow them for our own benefit, inshallah ta'ala. And there's more of that next week, to be honest. Imam Ghazali does deal with that concept of trusting scholars and prophets in particular, like our relationship between prophets and how their understanding is much greater than what we could understand. So how can, when they say something about Allah, or they say something is from revelation, it's from a higher, deeper learning, we're just down the ground, you know, the low level. We're just soaking in the rain and the benefit that comes our way. So, you know, bury yourself low, they say, and you'll benefit more, and you'll sprout out high. If you don't bury yourself, humble yourself, then you won't get anywhere in life, right? So we need to trust and humble ourselves before the right people, and we'll benefit, inshallah. I would ask that question: why do we follow, you know, for imams or schools when we've got the whole Islamic tradition and the whole kind of, you know, Quran and Sunnah? Why do we go to here for? What's that, right? It's a good question. I think it's a long answer, so I'm going to summarize it, right?
Yes,
yeah. But I'll give you a very quick summary. I touched on it today in a sense that, you know, there's a whole big picture that you've got to get to the roots of. But it comes back to this simple answer, short answer, is that when you say we've got the Quran and Sunnah, you're saying I can understand and interpret the Quran and Sunnah. So I'm going to go to the Quran, go to the Sunnah, and tell you what it means. That's the case. Because not the Quran and Sunnah isn't, black and white. Not all of it is black and white, I should say, right? It's not all clear cut. There are various understandings that proven throughout history, starting from the Sahaba themselves. They differed over the understanding of Quran, of the statements of the Prophet ﷺ, over practices, over derived rulings, whether it was in fasting, whether it was in zakat, whether it was in inheritance law. There's many things they differed over, divorce law, etc. So the Sahaba had different understandings of the very same sources you're talking about. So they're the Quran and Sunnah, but they all have their own understanding. So you're saying you have an understanding that's like the Sahaba, and you can take your understanding. If that's what you think you are capable of doing and you can do, then good luck. Right? Those who follow a school of thought are saying there is scholarship, right? That means hundreds of scholars, not one scholar. The scholarship that looked at the Quran and Sunnah and started to give rulings, right? And that's not just Imam Abu Hanifah or these four schools. Like I said, those before them, including the Sahaba, and those after them, including their students. And they gave us a methodology and approach of, this is our understanding, this is how we got to it, this is our understanding. Yes, they differed as well. So there's four schools, because there was more than four schools, by the way. There were several opinions. It came down to four in the end, four main schools that have their understanding of the Quran and Sunnah, basically. So what we're saying is we follow the Quran and Sunnah as well, and we've got the Quran and Sunnah, and we adhere to it more than you probably do. Who's to say we don't adhere to it as much as you do? But we have decided to trust in the scholarship of these great imams, these great people, a group of them, not one, right, that have come together and given us these rulings. And so therefore we follow the Quran and Sunnah through the lens and the understanding of the great imams of this deen. Who do you understand it through? Yourself, your teachers? There's somebody is going to interpret it for you because you don't speak Arabic. How can you understand the Quran and Sunnah? You learn the translations? Okay, your scholars are the translators. You've trusted in translators, and you read English, which, trust me, 110% never gives you the true meaning of the Quran and Sunnah. It's an interpretation of the translator. You've trusted the translator to get your rulings. Okay, if you know Arabic, then you've trusted your understanding of Arabic to get to the Quran and Sunnah. We've trusted their understanding of Arabic to get to the Quran and Sunnah. So whatever we do, the relationship between the Quran and Sunnah has to be based on understanding, a process. We're saying our process is the best through these people. That's why we do it, because this is the safest, best, most structured approach. Anything else is random, it's ad hoc, it's him, it's there, it's thousands of opinions. This person says, I know Arabic, this is my understanding. This person says, I know Arabic, this is my understanding, right? And we get a lot of people thinking, and I've come across people like this, by the way. I've come across people that say, oh, you do this in Islam. I'm like, what opinion is that? He goes, yeah, it says the Hadith. And he's misunderstood the Hadith. It's Arabs, by the way, I speak to, right? Arabs can't understand the Arabic. I would put it in a different way. Modern Arabs who haven't learned the classical Arabic can't understand the classical Arabic. So when they read it, they impose their modern and colloquial understanding, as it's called, their street level understanding, their home, current colloquial Arabic onto the classical text, and they just get it completely wrong, right? They mix up things and so forth. One person I had, he said, Isa alayhi Islam isn't going to return because it says this and that in the Quran. I was like, yeah, but do you know the interpretation of these ayat? He goes, no, in Arabic it means this. I goes, who do you follow? Because I thought he follows somebody. He goes, no, I understand myself. I read the Quran myself. My understanding. I go, you don't follow any sheikhs that are telling you this. He goes, no, me. I'm like, this is him reading the Quran and thinking he's understood it, and he's making up his own opinions on beliefs. So this is a big danger, that he goes against the consensus of the Ummah. Ummah's on one side and he's on the other side, like, Ya Latif, where you going, right? And this is not something on YouTube or something. This is real people I meet on the ground that are saying this, right? He sent people off to teach. So who were they following? They had the Quran Sunnah in Medina with the Prophet ﷺ. Yet they were following Sayyidina Ali in Yemen, or Sayyidina Mu'adh ibn Jabal. The Prophet sent companions to teach. So what were they doing? They were trusting in a teacher who could understand the Quran and Sunnah. So you see, that's the principle you have to convey to a person. There's a lot more you could say, but that's the principle of the whole concept. That we don't follow an individual. You follow the Quran and Sunnah through the lens of a group of people. It's not one. They think it's just one scholar that everybody follows. No, it's one scholar that everybody respects. They've named the school after him, the principles after him, but in reality there's hundreds of people involved. And through them, we understand the Quran and Sunnah. So I hope that answers your question. We haven't got time for any more. So if you're welcome to attend next week when we'll talk about more topics, inshallah ta'ala. And to our viewers at home as well, see you next week, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.